up next we have Katherine Matthews with a session on You Must Love Bugs. Oh, wow. Tableau and the Entomological Society of America. Well, that's a mouthful for me. So Katherine Matthews is a database manager for the Entomological Society of America and an unrelenting data evangelist. In her role, Katherine builds a culture of analytics and helps teams across the organization take a data-guided approach to their initiatives. She's also a part of the leadership team for the Washington, D.C. Alteryx User Group. Yay, another Alteryx fan. And the Association Tableau User Group as well. She's also a member of the Technology Section Council for the American Society of Association Executives. As a 501c3 nonprofit serving the professional needs of insect scientists and those in related disciplines around the world, ESA has a diverse array of programs and data sources to work with, and just one staff member dedicated to the data. Katherine's going to talk about several of ESA's initiatives, including one with the publications team looking at what types of research perform best in each of their journals. Thanks very much for joining us, Katherine. You can take it away.
All right. Okay. So let me share my screen. Okay. Is that looking okay there, Fee?
It's perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. So I've got sort of more of a case study than any sort of mind-blowing thing with earthquakes or network analysis. I'm very humbled to be a part of this group today. This has been incredible so far. Definitely worth staying up into the wee hours on the East Coast in the US. So, okay, so first things first, the elephant in the room. I am terrified of bugs. I took this job 4.5 years ago, and I still remember my mom saying, like, is that a joke? Are you kidding? And so it's been an interesting ride. I've learned way more than I ever thought I would need to know about insects and related arthropods. But it has also been fascinating to get to learn more about what insect science is and more about the people who do it. And so the way I kind of describe my role within the organization is a sort of a person as a service. So I work with all the departments across ESA, helping them see and understand their data. And I do use Tableau and Alteryx. I don't have a live Alteryx demo today, although now I'm kicking myself for it. But I've got a few things just to kind of talk about how our journey, our analytic journey progressed and how we got to where we are. So we'll start with the sillies. So what is entomology? So this is me on the right and my buddy who traveled to all of the chapter meetings. So the serious side is that entomology is the study of insects. It's a highly academic discipline, but it's also a group of people who love bugs, and they're just a great type of person to work for. And so our members include everything from researchers to high school educators, hobbyists, marketing people. There's all the people on the industry side that are developing, pesticides or different things like that. And everything down to like the orkin guy who comes to spray your house once a month. So this is the slightly more serious take on what entomology is. So, everything from defending your house to us to the forest, managing invasive species. We've kind of got it all covered. So as a result, entomology does a lot, therefore the society serving the science does a lot. And so we've got a lot of different systems. We've got upwards of 20 different places where we're storing data for our different program areas. And so we have the big one, red one in the middle, hopefully everyone can see the font okay, is our association management system, which is basically our CRM. That's our main source of records. And then we've got these other 4 big blue ones that are sort of our next tier major sources of data on our members and what they're doing with us and how they're interacting with the society. And then sort of the teal box or teal circles are the next tier below, and then green and then orange. And so not all of these are of the same level of importance, but they're all different pieces of the puzzle in understanding who our members are, who our customers are that aren't members, and what their journey looks like. And so when I started 4 years ago, we sort of had some very basic, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly reports, but we weren't doing anything that was giving that sort of like feeling of connection to the data. There was a lot of numbers and tables. There wasn't a lot of dashboarding or interactive visualization. And so we're still running off of just me and just some desktop licenses, but we've leveraged Reader a lot in getting people to actually start interacting with the data, which especially in some program areas where we have just a massive amount of different points of data, there's not only so much you can capture with a bar chart or with, a time series. Sometimes you really have to be able to get in there and hover over or zoom in or whatever the case may be to really see those specific data points, really see what that story is. And so just as an example of sort of like where we started with my little like modern caveman series up top. So like this was a pretty typical report for our journals program. It had, it's just a table in Microsoft Word. It had all the stats listed just out kind of flat and just the years. And so, someone who's very accustomed to looking at data and tables is going to be able to look at this and say like, oh, this is great. I see this trend. But the average person is going to look at this and, nod and smile and hope that they don't get called on to have an insight because it's just not something that immediately tells you any sort of story. So in the case of this particular report, this is where we took it. So don't be too harsh. This was one of my earliest dashboard attempts, but I still think it holds up. And so what we did was we took all of that information and we tried to make it dynamic, make it something where they could see either change over time or their comparison to competitors or comparison to prior year, or just giving them some sort of context for the data. Because we both didn't want people to still be looking at, flat data that didn't necessarily tell a story, but we also didn't want to tell a story without a context. We wanted to make sure that people understood what they were looking at and why it was the way it was, not just data for data's sake. And so if anybody out there is kind of interested in what some of these crazy things are, so this chart here, I'm pointing as if you can see, sorry, it's late. The chart on the bottom right is the impact factor for our journals. And so that's basically looking at how far-reaching the type of research that we're publishing is. And so this little segment is showing, these two colored highlighted journals, the blue and the green. Those are two of ours, and then the gray bars represent our competitors. And so it's kind of showing these editors who are looking at this report, this is where we stack up relative to the competition. Similarly, over the chart on the left is tracking the impact factor, both our average and then the competitor average over this 6-year period. So they can see, generally speaking, are we trending up with the industry? Is the industry trending up without us, or vice versa? Again, providing that context so that they can really inform their decisions. And then the top half of this dashboard, kind of going through backwards, I guess, is some basic stats on the journals and what the publishing process looks like. Not sure how many others out there, shout out if you're in publishing, but that time to publication is really critical. You can have the most well-cited journal in the world, but if it takes a year to get a paper from submission to publishing, then that's not really any good. So your publications team needs to be fairly agile and needs to be quick at moving through that process, that review process. So these were some of the stats that we wanted to put in front of our editors-in-chief so that they could make strategic decisions looking at the year ahead. So another angle we looked at with data was our membership. And one of the things that we're trying to work on right now is how, we as a society, we're the source of a lot of different data for the membership, but most of it's kind of a one-way street. They give us their data, we analyze it, we come up with our strategic decisions, and then we act on those. But working on sharing that back out with the membership is a big push for us right now. And so this map is just an example of something that I'm working on to be published out on our blog. Obviously, Tableau does maps really well, so it's not hard to generate one. But I wanted to try and do something that was a little bit more visually interesting, a little bit more in line with meriting a blog article and a write-up. And so I took this from, I'm pretty sure I saw it on a Makeover Monday, on Twitter at the very least, to give another plug for this community and how amazing it is with sharing. And it's a hexbin map, and so there's no actual map hiding back here. These are calculated fields that are driving these little diamonds that are calculating a ratio of the latitude and longitude so that it's making this like nifty representation of the United States. So it's kind of a neat little magic trick. And actually, while I've done this, a little side pro tip. So in Tableau, you can hide the sheets once they're assigned to your dashboard so that they're not cluttering up your navigation at the bottom. But if you wanted to get back to them at any point, you can just click the little pop out from the dashboard so that you can get back to the actual sheet. And when you're done editing it and you go back to the dashboard, it just hides itself again, which is kind of nice. I take advantage of that a lot when I'm presenting final output to people so that they don't have to see my like 400 working sheets where I've iteratively designed something. They can just see the final, dashboard or story or whatever it is that I put everything into. So, side note. But anyway, so this is just a representation of where our members are. And what you can see here in the blue is just, or in the colors rather, is a concentration of members. So lighter blue, fewer members, darker orange, more members. So it's kind of one of those great like gut check things too for staff. We know right off the top of our head that many of our members are in Florida, California, Texas, and then the New England states. And so when you look at this map and you look at where those orange dots are, you do see those. I mean, they definitely jump right out at you, but you're also kind of reminded that we've got all of these hubs in the sort of Midwestern region, that aren't to be forgotten. And they certainly aren't, but it's a nice visual reminder of what we're doing. So then I have another example from our publications data, and this one was kind of a fun first magic trick for me, using dashboard actions. So basically what we're looking at up top, to kind of orient you, is these are articles that were published in our journals in 2016. And in scientific journals, there's what are called mesh terms, which, because it's 11:15 at night, I won't try to remember exactly what it stands for, but it's a standardized set of terms that can be used to identify the content of an article. So it's just keywords, fancy keywords, but they're standardized, which makes them really nice. So you don't have to worry about people that have entered, human and humans, and human with a capital H and human with a lowercase h. They just pick these terms from the list, so there's no cleanup needed. And so the mesh terms, just the count of how many times they're used, just going across the x-axis. And then on the y-axis is how many tweets we saw on articles using those mesh terms. So it's kind of, I mean, it's, we don't necessarily drive our publication strategy around how many tweets a journal article gets. That's not exactly winning, but it's kind of neat to see the closest thing to an entomology article going viral. So, so this one jumps out. This one has a ton of tweets, but it doesn't have a lot of usage. So, in case you're curious and you can't put them together on your own, Amber tends to house Jurassic Park style mosquitoes that are harboring dino DNA. So this is an instance of one article talking about, the possibility of bringing Jurassic Park to life because we found a bug inside some amber. So it's kind of a funny case of like something that turned out to be really popular, even if it wasn't necessarily terribly impactful on the field. Twitter still loved it. And by contrast, over here, we've got one that did decently well on Twitter, but has been used quite a bit in our articles. So this is seasons, which makes sense when you're thinking about insects and field work. And the times of year that you're out studying them. Some of the other ones, feeding behavior, which is both kind of scary and kind of cool. Some of the less popular ones are host-parasite interactions, insect control, diet, microscopy. So anyway, so these are all the different mesh terms up here. And what I did was I brought in Google Trends data with a dashboard action. I'll show you what it does and then how it works. And so if we click on seasons, for example, we can see what the interest is over time in the word seasons. And that's fairly generic, obviously. So the Google trend has remained pretty stable throughout. But if we look at something that's maybe a little bit more science specific, like insecticides, here we get something slightly more interesting. So there was a lot more interest in Google Trends back in the 04 to maybe like 08 period, and then it kind of dropped off and it's remained relatively stable since. If we look at, let's pick another one, polymerase chain reaction, sort of a similar trend, which I wasn't expecting. We can look at humans, which has increased in interest according to Google. So it's a little bit a party trick, but also a fun way to kind of encourage people to look at not even just the context of the data within the society, but also the context of data within the larger picture. So we understand how well humans performs as a keyword in our journals, but this is also giving you a little bit of a fun context for how popular it is as a search term in general. So let's see if we can, the amber one is kind of spikes, interestingly, in different periods, probably similar to our article's popularity, coinciding with massive like fossil finds that people have taken a big interest in. And so the way that this is working, for those of you who haven't played with dashboard actions before, is actually pretty easy. And this was another one I got through Twitter. So it's just under dashboard and then actions up here. And then I've got this action here that I've named Google Trends data. And I've dropped in this URL, which is what's calling Google Trends and returning that graph. And I'm giving it this value that tells it what term to drop in. So that's where it's looking up the mesh term that I am selecting from above. And then it does also allow multiple values, though I don't think that's necessarily necessary here. But yeah, so it's as simple as dropping in the URL and telling it to fire on select and to look up this value from within your data set. And then you get to play with Google Trends and see where your stuff stacks up. It does eventually decide that you might be a bot and locks you out. So I think that is about as good an indicator as any. I wanted to leave lots of time for questions because I think entomology is kind of cool, personally. And also, I know that within the Tableau community, it's so welcoming. And I feel like even though I'm a very small case study, even though I'm sort of a team of one, working with a desktop license, I've never felt excluded from the larger conversation, but this is a great chance for any of those of you who are on the line that have questions about, how to get started or how to do as much as you can with just yourself or anything like that. I'm happy to take as many questions as I can in the remainder of the spot, and I think I should have about 10 minutes. So let me see, I can bring up the chat.
That's great. Thank you so much, Katherine. That was really, really fascinating. I really loved the hex bin map. It just creates such a beautiful lot of color as well, and having those tiny little color pops, it just makes it really, really interesting. How did people react in your role when they saw that?
So the map specifically, people thought it was really cool. I think it took a minute for them to realize that it wasn't like an artistic representation of our members, but it was actually data behind it. So you could debate that as being good or bad. But once I kind of showed them like, no, you can interact with it, post it out on Tableau, they'd be able to sort of take a look and see what these different concentrations are. Then sort of the eyebrows started to raise and they're like, oh, you didn't make a doodle, you made data. So it was kind of fun to see their reaction to that.
Yeah, it's just really beautiful seeing those pops of, like the darker sort of rusty colors, but then those lighter kind of pale peach colors coming through. And there's quite a bit, as you say, down that belt in the middle as well, or to the right.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, I know that you're obviously the only Tableau developer in what you're doing, but tell us a little bit about your Tableau journey and how you got involved using Tableau.
Yeah, happy to. So it's kind of funny. When I started with ESA, they had 2 Tableau licenses that were just kind of on the shelf. And so I agreed, like, okay, I'll do a call with Tableau and I'll learn about it. And I'm embarrassed to admit this now, but I got off the call with Tableau and I said to my supervisor at the time, I was like, I feel like I can do all that in Excel. So I was definitely wrong. You can't do this in Excel.
I gave my Tableau rep a really hard time when I first met him and said, you know, I've been working in data for a very long time and I can code pretty much anything. And he's just sitting there going, yep, just wait and see. And he still brings it up, even though he's not my account manager anymore. He still brings it up with me. So I know what that's like, totally.
Yeah. And I think I was talking about it on chat earlier too. Tableau was really great once I actually came around, which was not very long after. I think within a few weeks I was eating my words. For us, adding Alteryx really made a difference for adoption because, like I talked about, we have a lot of different systems in place, and so each one of these has its own unique identifier. I wish I could say that it was different, but we're matching them either with email addresses or names or other sort of identifying pieces of information, and just trying to combine all of this data to get a reliable, 360-degree view of our members. And so once we had Alteryx adoption of 1 as well, but once we had Alteryx in place and I could build these workflows that would say, okay, these data sources go together to make this report and I need it every day, week, month, whatever, or on demand, that made a big difference because it meant that we had data at our fingertips instead of like when somebody asks a new question, everybody kind of hides, and hopes that it doesn't land on their plate to have to answer it.
But when there's one analyst using both of it, I guess it's you, right?
Yeah. And so I was going to say my Alteryx rep loves to say that there's 100% Alteryx adoption at ESA for Tableau users.
And what was the adoption story for you at ESA? So it sounded like you had Tableau first, is that right?
I had Tableau first. I was liking it, but it didn't at the time. So this was like 4.5 years ago. So it didn't do as much in the like data prep stage as it does now. Like some of those like joins and whatnot that you can do at the data source level where it's fairly intuitive. I'd say the product has come a long way. I mean, just like leaps and bounds just in the 4 years that I've been using it really heavily. No, I was using Tableau and I was liking it, but I was finding it so limited in terms of what I could actually visualize just because of the nature of our underlying data. And so I literally took a flash drive of all the reports that I needed to be one big thing to the Tableau conference. And I was just kind of trolling the exhibit hall, like, somebody help me. One of the solutions engineers with Alteryx was like, come here, come sit down. And within like 10 minutes, he had solved my problem. And so I immediately just went home and bought it, which was like the easiest sale I'm sure they made that week. But it was like I had this problem. I knew which community to go to solve it. I knew I wouldn't be the only Tableau user who had fractured data. And so it worked out.
And you helped to run the Alteryx User Group in DC?
Yeah, so if there's anyone on the DC area on the call, we're meeting in October, I think, next. But yeah, because the Tableau community had been so welcoming and vibrant and helpful, I wanted to have the same thing in the area for Alteryx. And so when they started kicking off user groups a couple years ago, I volunteered to lead up the DC one. And so it's been pretty scrappy. We get about 20-25 people each time, though we did famously have a session where it was literally just me, my co-organizer, and the presenter doing a fantastic user group session about child mortality in developing countries the week before Christmas.
Oh, wow. So in we have an Alteryx user group. They also run them in Brisbane and Melbourne as well. We get maybe, I don't know, usually between 80 and 90 people coming along. I think the last one they had about 110, and maybe that's because Libby was in town and came to present to us, which was wonderful.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm really looking forward to hearing all of the dialogue that comes through on Twitter about Inspire and in September.
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I can't join the guys over there, but I would love to just work in time, right? And being down here, it's quite hard for me to get anywhere. It's at least, you know, if 20 hours of travel to get to the States or London.
Well, maybe they can do Inspire Down Under next year, and you know, they'll just get all of us to go your way instead. I'd be totally on board with that.
That'd be awesome. I'd love it. I'll pass the information on to our country manager, and hopefully he can make it happen. Now, one of the other questions that I have for you is, at the start of it, you said that you don't like bugs, and you seem pretty passionate about your bug data. So why is that? How did that happen?
So it's I think it's really true. One of our sort of like bylines that I totally believe in is that fear of insects is a learned behavior, and boy, did I do a good job learning it. But I think that exposure has really led to deeper understanding. You know, I mean, once they're no longer these like six-legged monsters that attack you in the night, and instead they're these fascinating creatures that are incredibly diverse, and they do all these crazy things, and they have all of these implications that you've never thought of. You sort of come around to it whether you want to or not. I think, some of our members like to say that entomology is the most important science you've probably never heard of. And I would say that that's been more than true in the time that I've been at ESA, just learning the far-reaching implications of it. And so that's why I'm really excited to serve the community that works in that area, because I think it's very critical to a lot of different global issues.
Well, that's super awesome. Thank you so much for staying up so late and presenting and sharing the story.